Welcome to Anniversary in the Schools, a program commemorating the 9/11 attacks. If you've participated before, welcome back. If this is your first time, know that you are joining hundreds of thousands of other students from around the world to remember 9/11 and those who were affected. I'm standing in one of the sites where the attacks took place, at the World Trade Center in New York City. This space is now occupied by the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. Today you're going to hear from 6 individuals connected to the attacks. They all have very different and very powerful stories to share. We hope that together they help you understand a little bit better what happened that morning and in the years since. And they'll be speaking to you in front of objects and spaces connected to their stories. You'll also hear from students born after the attacks, just like I imagine you were. Before we hear from them, though, we're going to play a short film that walks you through what happened on 9/11. The film focuses on 6 key events that morning. These are the moments that mark our day. Thank you again for participating. It's up to you now to remember what happened that day and in the years since. Soon it'll be you telling these stories to those who are younger than you. And that's a big responsibility. But it's one in which we've been entrusted and one that's incredibly important. For more stories after the program, visit 911memorial.org/learn. Thank you.
Good morning. 64 degrees at 8 o'clock. It's Tuesday, September 11th. I'm Lee Harris. Here's what's happening.
Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. An ordinary day in New York City. At 8:46 a.m., that normalcy ends suddenly when hijackers from the terrorist group Al-Qaeda deliberately crash American Airlines Flight 11 into the 110-story North Tower at the World Trade Center. First responders immediately rush to help.
Dispatch, Captain Brown, Rider 3. I'm at the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
I'm on the 35th floor, okay?
Okay.
Just relayed to the command post. We're trying to get up. There's numerous civilians in all stairwells. Numerous burn injuries are coming down. I'm trying to send them down first. Apparently, it's above the 75th floor. I don't know if they got there yet, okay?
Okay.
It's a free truck, and we're still heading up, all right?
Okay.
Thank you.
All 11 firefighters responding from FDNY Ladder Company 3, including Captain Patrick Brown, would be killed that morning. 441 first responders die as a result of the attacks, the largest loss of emergency personnel in American history. Just 17 minutes later at 9:03 a.m., it becomes clear that this is a deliberate attack when hijacked United Flight 175 crashes into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. At 9:37 a.m., a third hijacked plane, American Flight 77, is flown directly into the Pentagon, headquarters of the United States Department of Defense in Arlington, Virginia. Back in Lower Manhattan, at 9:59 a.m., the unimaginable happens. The South Tower collapses. Meanwhile, a fourth hijacked plane heads toward Washington, D.C. Passengers and crew aboard United Flight 93 learn from phone calls about the attacks that have already occurred. With this information, the passengers and crew storm the cockpit. In response, the hijackers crash the plane in an empty field outside Shanksville, Pennsylvania, just 20 minutes from Washington, D.C. All aboard are killed. Back in New York City at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapses 102 minutes after being struck. On September 11th, 2,977 people from over 90 nations are killed.
If I was able to speak to someone who lost a loved one on 9/11, one thing I would ask them is how are they dealing with the grief?
How have they moved on from that moment, and how do they remember the person?
I would ask them if they're proud of them.
I think that's one of the saddest parts about 9/11, all those families who had to go through that mental turmoil, believing are our loved ones going to come home?
Hi, my name is Julie Sweeney Roth, and I'm 47 years old. I live in New Jersey, and my husband, Brian David Sweeney, was killed on September 11th. I met Brian in 1998, just 3 years prior to the events of September 11th. And it was a chance meeting, I like to say, because I was actually in a bar in Philadelphia. It was a place I had never been before. And when he walked in, I remember turning my head to the side and looking at my girlfriend and saying, that's the kind of guy I can grow old with. We exchanged numbers that evening, and 7 months later, we got married. It was a very quick romance. After being married approximately 2 years, we moved to Cape Cod, and that's where we were going to settle and have kids and grow old together. Brian was very interesting, very unique. I've never met, and I don't think I ever will meet anybody like him. He decided to go to Pensacola, Florida, and go to officer candidate school and enlist in the Navy. In the Navy, Brian became a lieutenant. He fought in the Gulf War. He flew fighter jets. He was an F-14 fighter pilot. After he flew in the Gulf War, he ended up going to Top Gun in Miramar, California, and becoming a student. He graduated top of his class and then went back and became an instructor. But when he left the Navy, that's when I ended up getting that opportunity to meet him. He worked for a company that was designing a new fighter jet, so that job required him to fly to LA once a month. And I'll never forget the weekend prior to September 11th. It was a beautiful, beautiful weekend on Cape Cod. And Sunday night, when Brian would normally be packing, he wasn't. What had happened is he changed his flight from September 10th, which was Monday, to Tuesday, September 11th. And I remember seeing him walk away, and you don't think anything of it. It was just a normal day, and I was off to work. I was a high school teacher at Dennis Yarmouth High School on Cape Cod. There was a knock on my classroom door, and I could see through the window of the classroom door that it was the principal. And he had told me that I had a telephone call, and it was Brian's mom. And she said to me very directly, "Julie, we have a situation." And I said, "What's going on?" And she said, "Do you know what flight Brian is on? He's on a hijacked airplane, and he called me. I just wanted to know what flight he was on." I hang up the phone, and the first thing I did was I looked at my principal and I said, "Turn on the television." All I see when I turn on the television is the repeated coverage of that second plane going into the South Tower. Brian could fly airplanes. So my first thought was I was thankful that he was on one of these planes, because I believed that he could help the situation. I believed he could help the people. I believed he could land a plane if he needed to. So even though I just watched 2 planes fly into the towers and you knew nobody survived those crashes, I believed he was somewhere else helping somebody get through the situation. I get home, and I remember my mother-in-law saying to me that he had called me. So the first thing I did was I walked over to the answering machine. I pressed play, and I hear the answering machine voice with a timestamp on it, and it says 8:58 a.m. At 8:58 a.m., Brian had the wherewithal and the calmness to call me from the plane and very clearly said,
"Jules, this is Brian. Listen, on an airplane that's been hijacked, and things don't go well, and it's not looking good. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. Go have a good time. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you, and I'll see you later, Chester. Hi, babe. Hope I call you."
It was probably at that moment that I realized that he wasn't coming home. The calmness in his voice is what has brought me to this point. The fact that he believed that he would see me again, or see me when I got there, is what gets me through every day. I have remarried. I do have 2 boys of my own. They are 13 and 14, and they're my reason. They're my reason to do good and go have good times and be happy and live every day like, I'm not sure if tomorrow's going to come, but I live every day to its fullest, and I try to really make Brian proud in my choices and in what I do every day for as long as the time that I have here.
If I was talking to someone who had to make decisions on 9/11, I would ask them how they gathered up the courage to do that.
Were you scared?
How were you able to separate the overflowing of emotions from being able to do your job and your duty and your service to people?
Hi, I'm Wes Wong. I was a special agent of the FBI for 30 years. On the morning of 9/11/2001, I stopped at what was then our garage facility. One of the mechanics came up to me and he said, "Hey Wes, a small plane has flown into the World Trade Center." Since I was just north of the tower, I would respond and see if the city needed anything from the FBI. I got into the lobby of the North Tower. I go up to one of the fire chiefs, I identify myself. I said, "Chief, I'm just here in case you need something from the FBI." All of a sudden, we hear a loud boom, and all work stops in the lobby of the North Tower. Next thing, a young fireman comes running in, and he yells, "South Tower's been hit. Another plane has flown into the South Tower." Obviously, my role swings 180 degrees at this point. Now I'm the person that everybody looks to tell them what's going on. So now we're fighting a fire and rescue on two fronts. We're dispatching rescue workers to the South Tower. We're continuing our operation in the North Tower. All of a sudden, we hear a rumbling sound, and all work stops again. And I thought it was the North Tower. The first tower hit was starting to collapse. It was actually the South Tower, but we didn't know that at the time. Off to my left was an alcove, and I thought if I can make it to the alcove, it will act like a reinforced bunker, and when 110 stories of concrete and steel come down, it will hold the debris off of us, and I'll survive this. There was about 7 or 8 of us in this group that decided that running into the alcove was the right thing to do. We got into the alcove, and all of a sudden, the room filled up with smoke and debris. After a few seconds, it got eerily quiet. I had put my arm out because I didn't want to walk into a wall or pillar, and my arm just disappears. It's so dark you can't even see your arm. We had a few firemen in my group, and they were turning on their flashlights that were attached to their helmets. Chief gets on the radio. He says, "We're trapped in the lobby of the North Tower. We need assistance." Fire command comes back and says, "We need heavy equipment to get you out." Well, I will tell you, I started to lose it at that point. All of a sudden, there's a voice, and it says, "Is anybody down there?" And we yell back in unison, "Yes." He says, "I know you can't see me, but I will keep shouting. You need to come to me." Our spirits soar. I trip over what I think is debris, and I don't want the fellows behind me to trip, so I look down in the darkness, and what I can see is the outline of a fireman's bunker coat. I tug on my new best buddy, and I said, "Hey, I think one of your guys is down." 2 other firemen disappear in the darkness. It's still so dark I can't see them, but I can hear them. And one of the firemen says, "He's still breathing." And the other fireman says, "It's the father." I didn't realize at the time it was Father Michael Judge, most beloved chaplain of the New York Fire Department. I pick up Father Judge's right leg, we all pick up Father Judge, and we go towards the voice. We got up to the corner of the North Tower, Church and Vesey Street, and there were a bank of ambulances there. We turned Father Judge over to one of the EMS crews. So I'm on the northeast corner of the North Tower. I heard a second rumbling sound. I looked up into that blue sky again, and what did I see? I saw the top of the North Tower starting to implode. I was able to run 1 block north. I turned right, I dove into a doorway, and smoke and debris went by me. I had the great honor on the first anniversary of 9/11 to read some of the names at Ground Zero. The names I read started with W. So I spent about 3.5 hours with the victim wives and daughters, brothers and sisters that were lost. And They were all stories of love and of loss. So as you go through life, I hope you'll stop once in a while and think about this fateful day and all those that were lost that day.
If I were to ask a survivor of 9/11 a question, I would probably ask, how recent does it feel?
What were they thinking? What was going through their minds? Were they scared? Were they nervous?
In those first few moments, what did they think was happening?
I would want to know if there was ever a moment where they would have thought to give up hope in the situation.
Hi, I'm Michael HINGSON, a survivor of the terrorist attacks at the World Trade Center. And in 1999, I was hired by a company that asked me to open an office for them. We chose as our office space the World Trade Center and obtained offices on the 78th floor of Tower 1, the North Tower. One of our distributors asked if we would hold sales seminars. So we chose September 11th, 2001 to do that, and we invited 50 different people. David Frank from our corporate office came in from California. At 7:40, I arrived and began setting up our conference room for our seminars. I went and got a laptop projector. Most people don't think a blind person could do a laptop presentation using PowerPoint. Don't believe it for a minute. I can do most everything that you can do, including walking, getting around, traveling from place to place, working in a facility, leading a staff, and running a company even. At 8:45, David and I were in my office preparing when suddenly we heard a muffled explosion. The building kind of lurched, and then literally it began to tip. David was holding onto my desk. Roselle, my guide dog, was asleep under the desk. And we finally, David and I, said goodbye to each other because we thought we were about to take a 78th floor plunge to the street. About that time, the building slowed down and it stopped and it began moving back the other way slowly. Meanwhile, I called my wife Karen at our home in New Jersey and told her that there had been an explosion or something happened and that we were evacuating. I hung up with Karen. David came back and went to the stairs and started down. Almost immediately, and now it was about 8:50 in the morning, and I was smelling an odor and I couldn't place it. It took me a few floors to realize that what I was smelling were the fumes from burning jet fuel. A woman near us on the stairs stopped. She said, "I can't go on, I can't make it, we're not gonna make it out." And literally about 8 or 9 of us, and Roselle, surrounded her, and we had a group hug right there on the stairs. And I said, "Come on, you can do it. You can go down the stairs like the rest of us." Roselle gave her kisses. Roselle was really good at that. We got to about the 50th floor. David did, I think, an amazing thing that probably helped lots of people not panic. David said to me, "I've got to get my mind on something. I'm going to walk a floor below you on the stairs and I'm going to describe what I see." He assumed his scouting position and finally got down to the first floor. I was on the second floor and he said, "Hey, Mike, there are water sprinklers running. You're going to have to run through a curtain of water to get out of the stairwell." David was gone. I got to the first floor, heard this waterfall sound, told Roselle to go forward, hop up, which is a command that we used at that time to speed up, and we burst through the water out into the lobby of One World Trade Center. When we got outside, David looked and he said, "I see fire in Tower 2. I go, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Yeah, there's fire in the second tower." We heard this rumble that soon became this deafening roar. David ran. He was gone. Everyone was running. So I turned 180 degrees and just started running now south on Broadway, ran about 25 yards and suddenly caught up to David. Then we were caught in the dust cloud, all the dirt and debris from the collapse of Tower 2. We stood there, and then we turned and just continued to walk west on Fulton Street away from the area. We walked maybe a quarter of a mile or so, and we were in a little plaza when we started to hear that freight train waterfall sound again, and we knew that our building was collapsing. David looked back behind us and he said, "I can see another dust cloud coming, let's move to the side," which we did. We hunkered down and covered our faces and just waited for everything to subside. When it did, we stood back up. David looked around and he said, "Oh my God, Mike, there's no World Trade Center anymore." And I said, "What do you see?" And he said, "There are fingers of fire and flame, hundreds of feet tall, pillars of smoke. It's gone." So after September 11th, Roselle was really, of course, as always, the real hero. It's always about the dog. In 2003, we were invited to New Zealand to help with some fundraising efforts of the Royal New Zealand Foundation of the Blind, and they had gotten part of a column from the World Trade Center. And while there, they gave Roselle a commemorative medal and registered her as an official guide dog from the United States with the registration number 911. And I'm honored that that medal, her collar, is in this exhibit. We got a chance to meet President Bush in 2005. Again, it was all about the dog, but we were supposed to have a 2-minute photo op that ended up being a 15-minute interview. So many things happened that are absolutely appropriate to honor what she was and what she did.
I would ask a rescue and recovery worker, how do you find the strength to keep going day after day after day to that, basically, like, it was a cemetery.
How are they coping? How long it took to get back to normal?
If you could go back, would you do it all again?
Hi, my name is Sonia Agron. I am a volunteer docent at the 9/11 National Memorial Museum. I'm going into my 6th year doing this, and it's been the most rewarding work since my job as an emergency medical technician. When I did become an ENT was when I actually had a deeper respect for the job of a first responder. You spend 8 hours saving lives and getting in the middle of this or that, and then by the time you come home, you have to let all that stay behind so that you can be a father, a wife, a mother, a husband. My husband has, when he retired, he was on the job for 30 years, but prior to that, he was involved in many situations in the NYPD, and I wouldn't know about it until medal ceremony. I'm very proud of my husband, super proud of him. I'm still proud of him, but 9/11 took a lot from him, and it took a lot from me. And we are who we are today, partly because of our jobs, but also because of 9/11. So the morning of 9/11 was really spectacular for my family and I. It was my husband's 51st birthday. And I was planning a surprise for him that would take me into Midtown Manhattan. About an hour and a half after I got there, we were evacuated, and no one told us why. My job has always taught me to stay focused, and that's exactly what I did. And I know my city, and the city opened up for about 2 hours, and I got home, and when I did, my 16-year-old daughter was sitting on the floor, hugging her niece, and she looked up at me as if I was a ghost, and as I got closer, I heard her say, "Please God, let her be for real." But as I got closer to her, the house phone rang, which was impossible because there was no phone reception. Well, it would turn out to be a friend from Tennessee. Prior to that phone call, my husband did call, and he did say, "It's really bad here. It's horrible here. It's so dark." And I couldn't understand what that meant because I'm looking out the window and it's still daylight. But then he said, "I'll call you at 10. I'm going near Tower 7. I'm setting up parameters." And so the second call comes in with my friend. And when I told her where my husband was, she became silent. And she asked me if I had the television on. And when I said no, I turned it off. She said, "Turn it on. I don't know how to tell you this." And we did, and we saw Tower 7 go down. And it was at that moment that my daughter looked at me and said, "That's so unfair that we can talk to him and say, 'I love you and happy birthday,' and then he's gone. He's taken from us. It's so unfair." But I didn't think it was unfair because I understood that there were thousands of people that were never going to get that last goodbye or that last "I love you." And 10 o'clock came and Daddy didn't call. And it's now September 12th, and I'm not sure how I can handle that day. But when he walked into the door, he was covered in soot. And he was not the man I said goodbye to the day before. And my husband is a 6-foot-tall hunk of a guy, beautiful, handsome, gorgeous. But when he walked into the door, he did this. "Help me." For days after that, he wouldn't talk to us. And it's so important after tragedy for you to feel those hugs and that love. And you need that. And we didn't get it. My daughter and I didn't get it. And we understood why. Because 3 days later, he would tell us about his partners having died in the collapse of the towers. And so I became a recovery worker, and ironically, they assigned me to first responders. The hard part was getting them to take a nap. They would hold my hand and tell me, please, can you sit with me? I don't want to close my eyes. And I understood why. I understood what haunted my husband. I saw it. I was there. I went to ground zero. I smelled it. You can't unsee certain things. My husband would retire a year and a half later, and that was never his dream, but he could not do his job anymore. And so he retired. I'm going to say maybe 8, 9 years after that, I found the 9/11 community, and I found my voice. I couldn't get my husband to talk, and there's still people who won't talk. There are still people who can't talk. I became involved because I heard that a lot of people were getting sick, and I never thought that it would affect us. But we became advocates. We began finding people who were there to help them get the services they needed, never realizing that we would be one of those people. My husband found his voice right here in the museum. And he tells people about the illnesses his friends got until he wound up being one of them. My husband has at least 3 different lung diseases, stomach issues, cancer. I have the same thing. I have what is called a terminal illness. It doesn't mean I'm going to die tomorrow. It just means there's no cure. And that's what the 9/11 community still lives with every day. So you need to understand 9/11 didn't end at midnight or a year later. It's going on 19 years today, and 9/11 still goes on. One of the reasons why I do what I do, one of the many important reasons, is that 19 years ago, they stole the voices of 2,977 people, but they didn't steal mine. The other reason is young people, you. You don't know 9/11, you inherited that. So educating, especially here in the museum, is easy for me because I get to point to things and tell them the stories. And then at the end, when they ask me what mine is, their whole attitude changes. You were there. Well, there were many of us here. And you're never going to hear all of our stories. Too many. But you heard mine. Make mine. Let mine be something that changes you. And that became my mission. And that's why I do what I do to this very day. Until I can't anymore.
I think it's important that my generation and future generations remember 9/11 because we weren't alive when it happened. We weren't alive during really the direct aftermath, and it did shape our country and our policies.
I mean, it's a really influential event. It's had an effect on everyone who's lived through it. It's kind of part of our identity as a nation now.
The impact of 9/11 still carry on into my generation and will foresee past my generation and be a major part of the generations to come.
My name is John Lykin. I live in Shaker Heights, Ohio, and on September 11, 2001, I was living here in Manhattan with my wife, Erica, and we were expecting our first child, who was due to be born on October 2nd, 2001. On September 11th in the morning, it was a beautiful, sunny Tuesday morning. We got on the subway together and took the subway down. I got off in Times Square, where I worked at a law firm at the time. Erica got off the subway at Chambers Street, which is just a few blocks away from the World Trade Center. That area and that building had a special importance to us because just about 2 years earlier, we had become engaged in Windows on the World at the top of the World Trade Center. When she got off the subway that morning, the tower was on fire. Everyone was looking up. There was lots of noise and confusion, and Erica was afraid. And she immediately rushed to her office at the Legal Aid Society and called me, and she said to me, "Get out of the building. I don't want you in a skyscraper, and meet me at home." And I followed her instructions, and then I turned on the television, and saw all of the footage of the World Trade Center falling down and realized that I didn't know where Erica was. Cell phones weren't working, and I waited at our apartment for 4 hours while there was no word at all. 4 hours later, Erica came into our apartment and she told me that the baby wasn't moving. And the baby was a very active baby and always kicking, and that had us really nervous. So we ran outside and caught a cab to go to Mount Sinai Hospital. And when our cab driver got to Central Park, all the park lanes were blocked off. So we drove up to Central Park North, and there were police barricades there as well. And I jumped out of the cab and said, "We're trying to get to the hospital. I think my wife may be in labor." And the next thing we knew, we had a police escort with 2 police cars and lights and sirens taking us to the hospital. We got to the hospital, and we were initially told at the door that we weren't going to be allowed in because the hospital was expecting casualties. And after a couple minutes of explaining that we had a pregnant woman who may be in labor in the car, they let us in and brought us up to the maternity ward, where they hooked Erica up to some machines, and a nurse said, as we'll never forget, "You in labor, girl." And at around 5 p.m. on September 11th, Callie was born by emergency C-section at Mount Sinai Hospital. She was beautiful, 7 pounds, healthy, and I was a new dad, and Erica was a new mom. And all the horror and fear of that day in that moment melted away, and we were new parents. The hope that Callie gave us was shared with so many of our friends, and we all started to heal a little bit that day from Callie having been born.
Hi, my name is Callie Lycan. I'm the daughter of John and Erica Lycan, and I was born on September 11th, 2001, and today I turned 19 years old. So all my life, my parents have been telling me that my birthday is really special and it's a huge deal, and I brought joy and happiness to many people in my life, but I really never understood that because that was just the day I was born. What really made a difference to me was when I came to visit the 9/11 Memorial and Museum last summer with my dad, and it really hit me that I can make a difference in retelling the stories to honor the victims and first responders of 9/11. And that's when I decided to collaborate with the 9/11 Memorial and Museum to put on an assembly at my school and use the Anniversary in the Schools webinar. It's really important that as we continue to move forward into the future, that this day is never forgotten. You've heard my story and what I did. Now what can you do? Use the hashtag 9/11MuseumEd to share your thoughts and stories.